Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, August 1st, first round of budget hearings. And welcome the counselors as well as the directors and staff and anybody else watching. Our first item up is finance and a budget overview by Director of Finance Tracy Turbach. So welcome, Tracy.
Good afternoon, Counselor. Thank you. It's good to be here. I'll tell you straight away, today's my first day back from some vacation. So if I seem a little sluggish, it's because I am. I had way more fun than I probably deserved the last week or so. But we'll jump right into it, and I will be providing kind of a high-level overview of the budget, and then we'll have some other directors that will be up here before we're through today. And as you say, we'll be at this for the next each week for the next several weeks, getting through the overall 2018 budget. Before I get started, I do want to thank the directors and their teams. They just really do a terrific job in working with finance and putting their budgets together. This certainly wouldn't be as efficient and as well organized without a lot of effort from those folks. In addition, the mayor clearly puts in a lot of time and effort on the budget. And spends a lot of hours in meetings with us, reviewing departmental budgets. So I want to thank him as well. And last but certainly not least, my finance team really just steps up every year, year after year. They've got I've got a tremendously passionate, very dedicated team of folks in my office that make this budget possible, and really owe a lot of thanks to them for all the work that they put into it, night and day and weekends included. So with that, I'll get started with my presentation. I do want to mention some of the opportunities for education by the public and opportunities to provide input. Of course, as we said, we'll be providing some departmental presentations over the next several weeks. Live video streaming. These budget hearings are all live on CityLink. The budget documents and capital program documents are available on the city's website. And then later on in the process in September, we'll have a public budget hearing or public hearing for the budget on September 12th, and then on September 19th as well before the budget is adopted. So there's lots of opportunity for the public to become educated on what's in the proposed budget and also to provide some input as they see fit. Today, my part of the presentation, I do want to, as I always do, review a little bit about what's going on in the local economy, talk about some of the priorities that you'll see kind of coming out within the budget. We'll review some of the same information the mayor provided here a couple of weeks ago on the overall budget. Then we'll get into the general fund budget revenues and expenditures and the use of reserves or budgeted use of reserves. And then before I finish up, we'll touch on some of the other city funds as well. And when I'm done, Bill O'Toole will be providing an overview from the personnel standpoint and what's going on in this year's budget and provide some perspective on that aspect of the budget, followed by Sue Quanbeck-Etten on the central services aspect of the budget. She'll be followed then by the community development team, and that'll round out our presentations for today. So jumping in on the economy, if my clicker will work. Uh-oh. Must have a dead battery or something. Krista, you want to give me a hand? We talk about the economy every month when I'm here for my monthly updates. We are seeing continuing strong employment numbers in the Sioux Falls MSA. As you folks know, our population's growing. Construction activity remains strong, which certainly drives growth in our property tax base. So there are a lot of positive things going on in our local economy. But as you also know, for more than a year now, we've been talking about softening sales tax and entertainment tax revenues. So those are kind of the economic backdrop that we'll talk through here. The unemployment for June of 2017 at 2.5%. That compares to 2.3% a year ago. I will mention that just last month, or in June, the June data reflects almost 145,000 people employed in the local economy. That's up more than 2,800 from a year ago. And this graphic actually goes back to January of 2015, and since that point, we've added more than 6,500 people working in the local Sioux Falls economy. So again, as I say, very, very positive employment information. We also talk, you've seen this slide before, about the population growth that we've seen since 2010. We've grown more than 20,000 people, or the equivalent of the city of Watertown, which I'm very familiar with. So that certainly provides some economic drive to our local economy. Construction activity, I report out to you on this every month. You can see historically here, the gold portion or yellow portion of the bars represents the amount permitted through the midpoint of the year, through the end of June. With the blue portion of the bar, there's the second half of the year, so you can kind of see how we compare midpoint this year at 340 million permitted. Last year we're at 408. Just got the July numbers this morning, and we continue to run very, very strong this year, better than 90% of where we were last year's really record-setting numbers. So construction activity doesn't show any signs of really having slowed down just yet. At least the permits are going out the door pretty quickly. Of course, that construction is important to us for a couple of reasons. The sales tax that it generates is important, but it also helps us to grow our property tax base. Those permits, once issued, then once the construction begins, and eventually as those projects are completed and roll onto the tax rolls for the first time, we see that positive impact in our property tax revenues. This graphic shows you historically, since 2008, the percentage growth in our property tax revenues we've seen year over year. The blue portion is the inflationary adjustment that state law allows cities to take, and the gold or yellow portion is the growth, that new construction properties coming on the tax rolls for the first time. You can see in 2017, the current year's budget, we were allowed no inflationary increase, and we did budget for a 3.7% growth in our revenues, property tax revenues, from new properties coming on the tax rolls. In 18, the state has indicated 1% is our allowed inflationary adjustment, and the 2018 budget does include that, along with, again, a 3.7% growth in the tax base from new properties. That combined increase of 4.7% reflects about $2.8 million in new revenue, and again, of course, most of that coming from growth, about $600,000 from that 1% inflationary adjustment. Looking then at sales tax revenues, this graphic looks familiar to you, I'm sure. We've been looking at this every month now for better than a year, that downhill trend in terms of our growth rate. For the last 12 months, we've grown at about 1.2%, so we're still growing very modestly. We are projecting, for purposes of kind of trying to hit our target at the end of the year, that by the end of the year we will have zero growth in sales taxes. So we're trying to take a modestly conservative approach in forecasting the remainder of 2017. That if we have zero growth, essentially that will leave us somewhere just under $3 million short of our sales tax revenue budget for 2017. Entertainment tax revenues also slowing. Over the last 12 months, we're down about 2% growth rate. That's, as we talk, that's an indicator of some of the discretionary dollars, and we certainly didn't expect it to stay up at the 10% growth rate we were seeing in the summer and fall of 2015, but we'd definitely like to see that pick up beyond the 2% growth rate we've seen most recently. Of course, that slower revenue growth in some ways provides us the impetus to refocus on our priorities. And so I want to take just a second and talk a little about those priorities that you'll see coming out of the 18 budget. Really not a lot of new priorities, but certainly we have been laser focused throughout this process on these priorities. And it's really all about providing high quality core city services. That's really what we want all of our departments focused on, and avoid straying out of those areas that are not really part of the core city services. Of course, one of the core services we provide is public safety and protecting the people of Sioux Falls. So you'll certainly see in the budget an emphasis on public safety spending for 2018, as well as taking care of what we have. Our repair and maintenance budgets have remained intact. We've tried to grow them a little bit along with our public safety spending for 2018. Across all of our departments, we've asked departments again and again to refocus on improving their productivity and finding ways to be more efficient. And I think over the last several years, we've managed to achieve a lot of those things, and they really are paying dividends in terms of better use of technology, centralizing services are just a couple of examples that have been implemented that will really are really proving to pay off when money is getting a little tighter. And of course, a very high priority for me is to maintain this city's strong financial position. It's important for the city to adapt as circumstances change, and I think we've been able to do that. And the reason, of course, we want to do that is so that we don't begin to see our financial position deteriorate. So with that, I'm going to jump into the overall budget picture for 2018 and get into some of the numbers. The overall 2018 recommended budget is a little more than $457 million. That's comprised of 23 different funds, the 11 appropriated funds, and those are primarily those funds that we maintain that are supported with tax dollars, and 12 non-appropriated funds, which are really our enterprise or our utility funds, our internal service funds, and pension funds. So you can see the makeup of those two categories of funds and how much each of those contributes to that $457 million budget. Looking at the overall budget, expenditure-wise, the utilities, as the mayor, this is a slide right out of his presentation, utility enterprises really comprise the largest single slice of the pie at over $96 million. Highways and streets, public safety are also major portions of the overall expenditure budget. And it's important to keep in mind when you look at this chart that this includes both operating and capital expenditures. So it's all rolled into one graphic for you. Looking at then the revenue side of the overall budget, $463.8 million in anticipated revenue. No surprise, I'm sure, that the majority or the largest single piece is from taxes. That would include property taxes and sales tax revenues, as well as some of our other smaller miscellaneous taxes. And then the next biggest slice is from charges for goods and services, and that's primarily from our utility funds, water fees, sewer fees, parking fees, those types of things. One relatively small slice of the pie I'll point out to you is the intergovernmental piece. Accounts for about 4% and $19.8 million. That's revenue that the city receives from other levels of government, either from the county, the state, or the federal government. And 12.7 million of that 19 million plus is originating from federal grants or anticipated to come from federal grants. And I know that's given the federal budget discussions and some of the news stories coming out relative to the federal budget and potential programs that are on the chopping block at the federal level. That's something I know that all you folks are interested in as well. About half, a little less than half of that federal grant money goes into our general fund. The largest piece of that is for our public health department. The recent talks, recent trends for public health is actually for more funding. I think Jill will probably talk a little bit about that when she gets up here, but that has been kind of the trend. So the expectation is that we wouldn't necessarily see cuts in that area, perhaps some additional funding. Some of the other larger sources of federal grants that we get, our transit fund is, as you folks know, heavily dependent upon federal money. Over $3 million is in the 2018 budget for federal transit grants for operating our transit program. And then affordable housing, of course, is largely supported by federal grants as well. And some of those programs have been mentioned, and it's a long, really messy process to put together the federal budget. We really have it pretty easy here in terms of of how things come together. So things will no doubt look a lot different if they ever do adopt a federal budget. They really haven't done a true budget for many years in Washington, but I do know that's a point of interest and something we'll be watching closely as things continue to unfold at that level. So that's the overall budget picture. We'll move on and, as we always do, focus much more on the general fund, which is our primary operating fund. In 2017, or in the 2017 budget, the only category we really saw grow in the general fund was for employee wages and benefits. And most every other area in the 17 budget was either flat or reduced. And in March, I told you the 18 budget would probably look a lot like that. You heard that same message from the mayor last month when he presented the budget, that we know wages and benefits will be increasing. We will be adding some positions. Bill O'Toole will talk a little bit later about that and follow up on the mayor's comments. But most other areas of the budget will remain flat or be reduced, where, as I said, trying to maintain a strong budget for repair and maintenance, whether it's for facilities or buildings or any of those types of infrastructure items. Again, we have to focus on our priorities, and there just isn't enough money to fund everything that we'd like to fund this year. So looking at a breakdown of general fund sources, you can see that, again, no surprise, taxes make up the single largest source of funding for our primary operating account or primary operating fund, our general fund, 80%, and that's fairly equally split between sales tax revenues, that first penny sales tax revenue, and property tax revenues. And you can see there's about $8 million of other taxes that flow through the general fund. Again, that intergovernmental revenue, that $12.3 million, made up of some federal grants that I spoke to earlier. There's also some money under state law that the city shares in, motor vehicle revenue, licensing fees, liquor tax, bank franchise, those kinds of things comprise that intergovernmental revenue. I will point out the very last item on that column of numbers there is the use of reserves. That $3.9 million is what the budget contemplates as a budgeted use of general fund reserves, and I'll talk to that a little more in depth in just a minute. So $161.5 million in sources, and looking at the revenue piece of that, which is $157.6 million, you can kind of, really in a nutshell, see what's going on with our revenue picture within our general fund. Again, these are budgeted numbers, so the 18 budget compared to the 17 budget, you can see our sales tax revenues we're budgeting $2.2 million less, which reflects about a 1% increase on what we expect 2017 to end on, and that $2.8 million in new revenues from property taxes, and everything else is essentially flat with a very, very small increase in revenues from all other sources combined. So that's the revenue picture in the general fund. Looking then at expenditures, again, a pie chart by function shows public safety is almost 40% of our general fund budget. Again, that's one of the highest priorities that the city has, of course, $62.5 million for our public safety in the general fund, followed by culture and rec and highways and streets, and then it falls off fairly drastically after that. So looking at, there are a lot of different ways to slice and dice the information within the budget. So I've put in two slides that kind of show you the general fund expenditure budget. This table shows you by function. So you can see public safety, again, the largest portion, with increasing that slice of the pie by $2 million. And this is one perspective on the general fund budget. When we look at it by function, gives you a picture of kind of what areas of service are receiving the funding, where we'll be spending those dollars. You can see it nets out to about a $2.5 million increase over the current 17 budget. Looking at that same budget information, only from a different perspective by category, you can see personnel costs are where the dollars are going, where the new dollars are going. Personnel costs in the 18 budget are up about $3 million over the 17 budget. And most everything else, with the exception of repair and maintenance and utilities, are going down. The personnel impacts, of course, and Bill will get into this a little more, relate to the COLA, the 1.5% COLA, the health insurance premium increase, and then a small number of new FTEs. The repair and maintenance increase, you can see that's up about $500,000 over the 17 budget. That's being driven by increases in funding for some traffic control equipment, which is a very high priority, and building repairs and maintenance. So those are just a couple different ways to look at that general fund budgetary information and what's changing from 17 to 18. I want to turn and talk a little bit more about reserves. I mentioned that we're proposing in the 2018 budget to use $3.9 million in general fund reserves, and this gives you a historical perspective on the use of reserves. The first column indicates how much each of those years we budgeted to use in general fund reserves, so they're shown as a negative number. That's the amount we anticipated using to balance our budget. And the actual use of reserve, in fact, most of those years, the first 5 or 6 years there, we actually added money to the reserves. And I know that some of you understand this, but to budget, for budgeting, when we budget to use reserves, that's a method to demonstrate that we're balancing our budget. By law, we have to have a balanced budget. The sources of funds have to equal the uses of funds, and so this is a way that we can demonstrate that. Even though, as this table indicates, we in the last 10 years or so have not ever spent all of the money that we budgeted to use out of reserves. In fact, those first 5 years, we added $5 million to the reserves, and with the 18 projections, 17 and 18 projections in there, that would be using reserves of about 4.8. So it's really netted out to over that entire time frame from 2010 through 2018. We expect reserves to change very, very little. One of the reasons that happens is that spending 100% of the budgeted expenditures will rarely, if ever, happen. I have not seen it happen in my time. Typically, there's 1.5% to 2% of the overall general fund budget that goes unspent, and so we don't. And when we make our projections and our forecasts for what's really going to happen, we anticipate that there will be that 1.5% to 2% remaining unspent within the general fund budget. Of course, the city's objective is not to continually accumulate larger and larger reserves. We're not like a business where we're trying to build wealth. Long term, the objective for the city is to break even. We shouldn't be taking more money from the public than it takes to provide the services to the public. And so as our budgets grow, we do need to see a very slight positive growth in our reserve just so we can maintain that 25% target. But that is kind of the overall long-term goal. And you can see in 17, we budgeted to use $2.1 million. Our latest projections indicate we'll actually use about $200,000 in reserves. In 18, as I mentioned, we're budgeting $3.9 million. And we're really projecting, by the time we account for those unspent dollars, about $700,000 of reserves actually used. One of the key things that we do every year, and this is something the city has been doing for a long, long time, and it's really been a terrific tool to use. It was implemented well before I ever came to this city, but that is to work on and propose a general fund forecast for reserves. So we look at each and every decision as to how it will impact the city general fund over the long term. Just take a minute or so to explain this graphic. The 2000, and this reflects the general fund reserves as a percent of the general fund budget, and that's the policy that the council has set. The target is 25% of our expenditure we want to have in reserve at the end of the year. So 2016, we actually ended with a reserve of 26%. We're projecting to end 2017 at 26%, and the proposed budget would get us at 26% at the end of 2018. This is, and some of you have heard me say this before, that this forecast is really the most critical element of developing the city's general fund budget, because it really forces us all to stay honest in terms of what we're budgeting for and take into account the long-term impact on our operating budget of the decisions that we're making today, whether it's making a decision to open a fire station or an aquatic center or add employees. Those all have long-term consequences to our operating budget, and so that makes this forecast absolutely critical going forward. It would be very easy to take a one-time source of dollars and start adding employees, but then those costs of an FTE continue to grow, and they just don't go away. They get bigger and bigger every year. So it's essential that we take into account that long-term impact of today's decisions. This is just a forecast, however. It gives you a 10-year perspective, and I do want to share a little bit with you about just what our track record looks like and how much these forecasts from year to year change. So I'm going to show you, this is an exact duplicate of the forecast that was presented 5 years ago in July of or August of 2012 when we were presenting the 2013 budget to you. So you can see that the forecast indicated that in 13, 14, 15 we'd be drawing that down slowly in percentage terms toward that 25% mark. In the next bars, I'm going to show you what the actual results were for those 4 years. So you can see in each of those first 3 years, 13, 14, and 15, we actually ended the year slightly better than what we had projected. And in 16, you can see and that's really been driven by that slowdown in growth of sales tax revenues, we ended just slightly below what we had projected back in 2012. So we're very, very close to what we had projected in percentage terms. Now keep in mind the dollars are changing, and we really only have one tool to adapt, and that is controlling spending. We don't have a lot of ability to adjust revenues within our general fund, so when revenues slow down like they did in 16, we have to adapt by constraining our spending. Now, the last piece I'm going to show you then is today's forecast, what we're forecasting for 17 and beyond, and you can see they're almost identical to what we had forecast 5 years ago. There's virtually no difference for where we expect our reserves to end in 17 today versus where we expected our reserves to end in 17 5 years ago. There's really a couple points I think I want to make with this, and one is that the forecasts really don't vary very drastically from year to year. They are very stable, and that stability reflects really two things. One, our forecasts are accurate. Typically, they do tend toward the conservative side of things. You can see in 3 out of the 4 years where we have actual data, we ended the year slightly better than what we had forecast. And I think most importantly, this indicates that the city does adapt very effectively when the revenue picture changes. So when things started to change in 16 and our sales tax revenues looked like they were starting to slow down in terms of the growth, we very quickly began to adjust our spending pattern, because as I say, we have very little control over our general fund revenues. We can't put our services on sale and hope people are going to buy more police services or fire services like a private business might to generate more revenue for the business. We have to essentially take what we get. So in order to hit our reserve targets like this shows we really have to manage our expenses well. And I think this graphic demonstrates that the city and the city departments have really done a phenomenal job of managing those expenses. So that's our city general fund, our primary operating fund. I'll jump into some of the other funds and provide you an overview of those. First, the utility enterprise funds. I mentioned earlier that a little over $96 million in those 5 utility funds. This slide shows you the breakdown of those. The water and water rec are far and away the largest of those funds. And I do want to take just a minute and walk you through a little bit more information on those utility funds because they are so important. The key thing when we look at utilities is the cash flow. Because as you folks know, the rates for all of our utilities, all of our enterprise funds have to generate enough revenue to support all the costs of providing those services, whether it's the day-to-day operating expenses, the long-term capital investments that they have to make. In some cases, we have debts that we're paying off with some of these enterprise funds. So those water and sewer revenues and parking revenues and so forth have to generate enough cash flow to pay all those expenses. And so this is really a snapshot of those 5 enterprise funds, and it shows you the sources of funds, exclusively operating revenues really in 4 out of the 5. We're anticipating a small amount of borrowing, $1 million in the Water Rec Fund in 2018. And then the cash flow that's going to be going out in terms of funding their operating expenses, the capital projects within each of those funds. And you can see the Water and Water Rec are servicing state revolving fund loans, and in the case of the Water Fund, the Lewis and Clark bonds as well. So you can see that there would be a modest draw on cash balances within the electric, water, and water rec funds. It's primarily driven by their capital program in 18 and their anticipated capital expenditures. And as this shows, positive cash flows in parking and landfill. Now, in the case of the landfill, it's 18 is a relatively light year in capital spending. And the parking will really be dependent upon the parking ramp decision. You folks are well aware of that. That's coming up here in the near future, and depending on how you folks decide on that, will have a big impact on where the public parking fund ends in terms of a cash position. The key points here, 1, very little borrowing planned for 2018. Water and Water Rec are the only funds that are currently servicing debt payments, and by and large, our enterprise funds, all 5 of them, are very, very strong financially. That's really the bottom line. The parking fund is ready. It's got a solid cash balance that they can invest into a parking ramp to minimize the amount of debt that would be necessary for that project if you folks choose to go forward with that. And the water fund is also ready. The Lewis and Clark bonds I mentioned are coming up on their call date. So in November of this year, they'll be eligible to be called, which means, first of all, very, very likely that at the very least, those bonds will be refinanced to capture a lower interest rate for the remainder of their life. But we are also evaluating how much cash in the water fund could potentially be utilized to actually pay down some of that debt when that call date gets here. So Finance and Public Works have been collaborating on that along with our financial advisor. And as I say, that's coming up in November, the call date. So throughout the remainder of this summer and early fall, we'll be working on that, and you'll certainly hear more about that in the near future. Looking at all of those other 23 funds that I mentioned, this really gives you kind of a snapshot of where those are. Of course, the Sales Tax Capital Fund, that's really spread throughout a number of departments. The internal service funds, those are our 5 internal service funds that provide insurance services to the city. Technology and fleet are included in that. Our pension funds, storm drainage, and entertainment tax next week. You'll hear presentations on, touch on those. In a couple of weeks, you'll hear about transit. Later today, when Sue is finished, then the community development team will talk about the affordable housing. I do want to point out, I think it was a month or 2 ago, Councilor Erpenbach, I think you asked about the Event Center construction fund and some of the dollars that are left in there. And we are budgeting this year, I think it's $1.6 million. So most of that 1.7 will be to not spend it, but to transfer it out of and essentially close that Event Center construction fund. Those dollars will then go into our sales tax capital fund and be used to make the next bond payment on the Event Center bond. So that remaining balance that's in that fund will be closed out and utilized then for the next scheduled bond payment. And the same is true with a much smaller dollar amount within our flood control. Some years ago, the city issued bonds for flood control, and that fund is set to be closed out next year as well. One last slide on the general government operating. On some of the earlier slides, you saw the general government portion of the general fund, and that's made up of essentially the mayor and council budgets, as well as the attorney, human resource, finance, and central services, the facilities, technology, and media, multimedia support budget. So all those things roll together, add up to $17 million, and are increasing about $300,000 over the current 17 budget. So with that, I will pause and let you folks ask whatever questions you have on your mind before we move on to the next segment of the presentation. How'd I do?
Well, that was nearly 30 minutes less than last year, Tracy.
Oh,
not that I'm keeping track or anything. That must be a product of that vacation before.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe so, yeah.
No, it seemed very, very well prepared. Thank you very much, Tracy. Any questions for the director? Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, one of the things that stood out to me, so basically we're raising property taxes by 1%, which is the amount allowed by the state as part of the property tax freeze and the regulations that we follow. So out of the $2.8 million in new dollars that we're getting from property taxes, remind me, you said the number and I missed it. How much is a property tax increase that we're passing, and how much is new dollars?
The 2.8 is broken down between the 1% inflationary increase that you mentioned is about $600,000, and the other 2.2 million would be from growth in the tax base, new properties.
But that is a choice we're making as a policy decision as part of the budget to raise property taxes by
That's
that
correct.
amount, rather than we're going by the cost of living. So one of the other places that I wanted to focus, if I could, Mr. Chair, is that you talked a lot about core city services, not straying, priorities, and budget. And I'm looking through some of those areas that Mr. Bixler gave us, our budget analyst. And I guess, give me an idea, because I met with one of these groups yesterday as part of something else that they have coming on the agenda tonight, but they got the impression that everyone was being cut by 25%. And I think different areas are, I think we've used the term review for consistency with the role of city government. That's an accurate way we're kind of looking at this. How did we decide, or when you put the budget together, how did you decide which agencies were getting a 50% cut versus a 25% cut when we're looking for consistency in what our role of government is?
Well, I'll try to answer that as best I can. I think the list is long, and there are, every one of them is a little bit different story in terms of their connection to the city. By and large, yeah, I think there are quite a number that are of these outside agencies that do provide valuable support services to the city, and I think you'll find some of the directors that are associated with those agencies are very supportive of maintaining that relationship, because it does help them do their jobs better, be more effective at providing the services that they're providing. That's not true in all those cases, and those are some that kind of bubble to the top. If it really wasn't supporting a key city service, or the department wasn't really adamantly advocating to continue that relationship, that was one of the things that we would have considered. I think in some other cases we considered what's changed maybe since the relationship first began. Has the circumstance changed? Is the need still there? You folks were very involved in the Prairie View Prevention review and came to the conclusion that that there's probably a better way to approach that need in the community than what we had been doing. So there's not just one answer that really applies to every one of those organizations. Every one is different, and I think you'll find if you ask the directors, those that are remaining unchanged, they'll be able to say why it's important to them and why they weren't on the list to be reduced. In those cases where we didn't have that, where there wasn't a really strong nexus to what the city services that department is providing, then those were, as I say, those were the ones that kind of bubble to the top.
Thank you, because this isn't the right time to go through each one and make those policy decisions as a group that we're doing, and I appreciate the overview part of what we're doing. I'm just, I guess if they aren't consistent with our role of city government, why we have them in the budget at all then? At that point, are we in the process of phasing them out, or would that be the long-term intent so that it doesn't make a large impact on these agencies that do provide good work, but we've decided, or we're trying to decide if they're consistent with the role of city government, if we would phase them out? So is that probably your recommendation over time, that a lot of these would zero out, or if the economy got better, we would get back into doing some of that? What's the long term?
No, that's a good question, and I think, whether it fits within the role of city government, that's obviously to a large degree a judgment call, and that's we aren't prepared to make that call on each and every one of those. We're kind of starting us down the road to take a hard look at those. I think when money is tight, that's obviously an impetus to revisit some of those past decisions and ask, does it really still make sense for the city to be participating in those? One thing that didn't factor into it was any sort of judgment about the worthwhile nature of the services that these organizations are providing. It's not a judgment at all about the good work that they're doing. They're all doing good work, I'm sure, and there are a lot of other outside organizations, nonprofits, doing wonderful work in the community that aren't on the list, that have never received city funding. So it's not a judgment call about whether what they're doing is worthwhile. It's really a matter of trying to find that right alignment within the lane that we're in as a city government. Is it appropriate for us to put taxpayer dollars into those services, or is it better that the city find a better use for those dollars? So each one will be a discussion, and everyone will have their own perspective on it, but that's what you see is our initial perspective.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the director at this point? Councilor Staley.
Thank you. Director Turbeck, first question I have is, have we ever tracked, and I'll back up. I know in the past when I've done my tax returns, there was a time when you could take and add up all your sales tax receipts. You can either claim the kind of a standardized number, or you could actually keep track of your own spending on sales tax. Have we ever tracked in our city what generally an individual puts forth in sales tax?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because I'm thinking whether you're living in a high income bracket or a medium income bracket, we all kind of spend our money on, as far as groceries and things. I think some things across the board would be kind of predictable. So go ahead. Have we tracked that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure how the city would go about that. I'm sure there are organizations or economists or other folks that maybe have analyzed that on a statewide basis. Occasionally, the sales tax becomes a point of debate, and it who's actually paying that tax. But we don't really have any way of knowing who's paying those tax dollars. It's really a black box from my perspective. We receive a check from the state or a payment from the state.
Right.
We don't know what businesses have collected that tax. We certainly don't know what individuals have paid that tax. So.
Okay. So it's okay.
It's really an unknown from.
And when you're talking about in 10 years we've grown by 20,000 people, I still come back, and we've talked about this before, but I still come back to the premise that when we've grown by numbers of people we should be growing sales tax just because we're buying groceries and there's certain necessities you cannot probably buy online. So I'm kind of the mindset that all people are pulling back a little bit in their spending. They're becoming a little more conservative in what they're going to put forth, unless it's just like the city is doing because of that. Okay, first question. The second question is, I was wondering when you were talking about the on page slide number 7 and the growing property tax base, and that was very interesting. You were talking about we're predicting that we're going to be gaining 2.8 million. Am I right with that?
Right.
what was that in 16 that we grew on our property tax revenue by 2.8 million? Did I get that
The
right?
2018 budget would reflect an increase of about 2.8 million in revenue.
That's what we're projecting.
Right.
So what did we increase in dollars in 2017? How much did we increase?
I guess I don't have that number, but I can certainly get it for you.
Well, I mean, generally, have we pulled in 2 million extra?
It would be in that same neighborhood of 2.2 million, because the percentage of growth in the 18 budget from property tax growth, new property coming on the tax rolls, is 3.7%. The 17 budget, when compared to the 16 budget, was also 3.7. So it would be very, very close to that $2.2 million number.
Right, and we've had this discussion before when we're talking about the building permits, and I mean, we're always growing with that revenue and how that actually plays out in the millions for our, within our coffers. So 2.8, I got it. Okay, then another question. We were talking about reserve funds, and you said we don't want to be overdoing it on a reserve fund. It's not prudent. And we've passed the 25% mandate. Is there legally a number? Does a municipality have to have a reserve fund, or is that just something that's recommended?
I'm not aware of any legal requirement for a reserve fund. Not for our general fund specifically. When we talk about other types of funds, oftentimes there is a legal contractual obligation to maintain reserves for debt service payments and those kinds of things. But as it relates to the 25% reserve for the general fund, no, there's no state law that requires that.
And then last question. We were talking about the utility funds, and you said 96 million in utility funds. Is that, am I hearing this right, that is money coming in and going out?
That'd be the amount that they're budgeting to spend in 18, 96.5.
Right, so that is flushing through total.
Well, in the Water Rec Fund, it definitely is flushing through, yeah. I'm not sure how you describe it in the other fund. But yeah, it's all revenue either generated in the past, that's carried over, dollars that are carried over and available from past years that have accumulated in the fund. Sometimes that projects are funded that way. Many of the capital projects are funded within our enterprise funds on a pay-as-you-go or cash
Right,
basis.
but what I'm getting at is that I'm talking about the amount, we've had this conversation before, what is sitting in the fund as an ongoing number versus what is, like the general fund we have, it's here, it's gone. It's here, it's gone. Every year it's used and then it's replenished. So the enterprise is a little different, because some of that money stays put. Like we talked about, I've used the word you don't like, the slush fund, but it's like a savings account in a sense, right? We have some money sitting there.
Yeah, and I mentioned the parking ramp project, for example. There is a cash balance within the parking fund. They have taken in more in recent years than what they've spent to operate the system, and so they have accumulated a balance of cash within that fund then that can be utilized and invested in this project rather than having to borrow the entire cost of the project. We're hoping to be able to, assuming you folks approve it, to invest, pay for about 20% of that project utilizing cash.
Which project are you talking about?
The parking ramp.
The multi-use parking ramp?
The parking ramp project. Mm-hmm. And I also mentioned the water fund has for several years now generated positive cash flow, meaning they've taken in more cash than what they've paid out to fund the system. And so when we look at these Lewis and Clark water bonds that are coming up to their call date this fall, we are looking at, as I say, at the very least, refinancing the outstanding bonds to get a better interest rate. And on top of that, also evaluating how much of those bonds could be paid off utilizing some of the cash in the water fund, further increasing the amount of interest savings over the life of those bonds.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions for the director? Okay, seeing none, we are ready to move forward then.
You guys really let me off easy today. I appreciate that.
You are most welcome.
Today.
Okay, next
Today.
we have Director of Human Resources, Bill O'Toole, with a
Good
personnel
afternoon, Council.
overview.
Bill O'Toole, Human Resources Director. Appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview of the personnel. Obviously, our personnel are one of our greatest assets and resources in the City of Sioux Falls. It also represents a significant expense, as you know. So we want to provide an overview. Bullet point here, how we are going to approach this. I'd like to provide a review and a functional allocation of the personnel across the spectrums of city government. We'll talk a little bit about employees per 10,000 population. I also want to share with you some of the statistics, employment statistics that we have in the City of Sioux Falls, kind of those expressing interest in our positions, as well as our turnover. And then take a look at those 2018 personnel services, drill that down into the general fund where the vast majority of our employees reside from an operational standpoint. And of course, we'll review those 6 new positions that the mayor talked about in his budget presentation in a little bit more detail. So again, this is not dollars. This is, as the slide title says, the 2017 allocation of personnel across those various spectrums of government. And clearly, much like some of those other slides that Tracy indicated, this does, I think, is somewhat reflective of the priorities that councils and mayors have had over the years. But this is just a breakdown of the 2017, or those 1,234 full-time employees across the spectrum of city government. This next slide, this shows the 2017 City of Sioux Falls employees per 10,000 population. And what's being shown there in the gold is the city population from 1990 through 2017 and its growth. The blue represents the number of full-time city employees across that same time period. And that squiggly green line through the center then represents the number of full-time city employees per 10,000 population. Tracy talked about the growth in more recent terms. This is a little longer spectrum. And again, if you look at this since 1990 to 2017, or a 27-year period, we've had a 77% increase in population, just over 77,000 residents. And on that longer-term basis, that's slightly larger than the size of Rapid City. During that same time period, we've increased city employees by 47% through that same time period. Next, I'd again just like to take that same information then of the 69 full-time city employees per 10,000 population. How does that then compare against some of our peer cities that we oftentimes compare ourselves against? Just a small disclaimer on this slide. We're not comparing services. This is just kind of a straight-up comparison of these cities against the City of Sioux Falls. And obviously, we think we stack up fairly well with respect to the number of city employees we have for our size. And as I said at the outset, I wanted to share a couple of employment statistics, kind of the front door and back door, if you will, analysis. And on the front side, what you're seeing here is 4 years worth of applications illustrated in the blue bar chart. And down below, the number of vacancies we've had, and then the average number of applications that we're seeing for those vacancies. Obviously, a little bit of a downward trend here. This is certainly not unique to the City of Sioux Falls. It's certainly on our radar. We're paying attention to this, but what I can tell you, obviously Tracy talked about the unemployment environment at that 2.5%. We're victim to that just like anybody else. But what I would share with you, and in my conversations with Jane Hannestad, our employment manager, despite these lower numbers, which again, we'd like to see higher numbers, we are still getting quality city employees and quality applicants for our positions. And on the reverse side, again, just at a high level, as we look at our turnover rates in the City of Sioux Falls, kind of the back blue chart is the total turnover. And on the front side, I thought it would be interesting to illustrate what's that turnover without retirements into the equation, just a little more information, a little more data. And frankly, just looking at the kind of the all-in turnover in 2016 at 6.5%, that's quite a low industry average. very reflective for us. Obviously, it keeps our costs down when this happens, and I think tells a pretty good story. And for those of you who are interested about that peak in 2014, if you remember, we were making some pension changes prior to that, and there was just a vast number of retirements that occurred in 2014. And in fact, we had about 85 of them in 2014, and we're usually around 30, 32 retirements a year. So there was a spike there because of that, and then we started trending back to more normal rates. Again, now talking about the 2018 total budget of $457.2 million. If you chart that out, as this graphic illustrates, the personnel costs represent 29% of the overall budget. It's obviously not where we're going to spend most of our discussion, but again, just kind of on a drill down method. The vast majority of our employees come out of the general fund, and that's what this is illustrating. The personnel costs of the $161.5 million general fund budget for 2018, $109.6 million of that is towards personnel costs, or 68% of the general fund. And we'll talk a little bit more about that more in a minute. But again, I also want to drill this down even further on the personnel costs so the council understands where those dollars are going. And as you would expect, there are no big surprises as it relates to this. You would expect that from the personnel side that wages represent 71% of those costs, followed by the pension costs at 13%, health, life, and dental insurance at 12%, and really that OASI and workers' compensation. OASI is Medicare and Social Security, another way to look at that. So that's the drill down of the 2018 general fund personnel services. Again, a couple of slides ago, I said it represented 68% of the general fund. And if you look at since 2009, how that has looked over time, I would expect this to be rather flat. There's no surprises here. If there were any significant spikes, we would be talking about something, but just to give some perspective over time as well. So what are those new positions that this budget is reflective? Obviously, you've seen this before. 4 police officers added to the police team, and 2 licensed clinical social workers, or in the behavioral health side of the equation, in the health department. And I know one of the terms that was used in the mayor's discussion about the health positions was that they were budget neutral. And really what that means is that the department is offsetting their professional services costs and their part-time costs to get us to that kind of budget neutral position. So obviously there's cost with doing it, but there's just offsets elsewhere to make it happen. So if we look at the 2017, obviously the 1,234 full-time employees, if this budget's approved, we're adding 6 more positions, then for a grand total of 1,240. And I think it was last year, Councilor Erickson, you asked some questions about part-time costs along that line. And I know you'll all see this in your budget books. Each department has the corresponding full-time equivalents in part-time dollars. And just so you're fully aware of the add up, if you will, in part-time full-time equivalents, there's another 246.2 FTEs in that part-time arena, if that makes sense. And again, Tracy mentioned a little bit about this as well, and I want to talk about it more as well. An additional $3 million for city employees' wages and benefits, really emphasizing that we're continuing our commitment and investing in our city employees. Again, one of our greatest resources. They're the ones out there delivering the programs and services for the city of Sioux Falls. And that $3 million breakdown, obviously the 1.5% for the cost of living adjustment, which this council is fully aware of with respect to the negotiations that took place, and step increases account for about $1.2 million of that $3 million. We did have health insurance increases of about $1.4 million, and with the 6 new positions, that was also an additional about $400,000. Looking forward, I also wanted to bring to the council's attention, and you've heard me talk about it before, that we're going to be engaging in a compensation and benefit study in 2018. We'll be doing an RFP for those services. This budget is reflective of that study. It is something we commit to and do about every 8 to 10 years. It's time for that. We've been talking about it. That is coming. That will be a significant issue for us moving forward. You'll hear more from me about that as we do move forward. And of course, it's hard to believe, but we will be engaging in collective bargaining probably shortly after the first of the year as well, so there'll be more to come on that. So with that, that's kind of a very high-level review of the personnel side of the equation, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you would have.
Thank you, Director O'Toole. Any questions for the Director? Yes, Councillor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director O'Toole. I know it's over quite a stretch of time, but like the decrease of employees per 10,000 of population, I mean, is it a troubling or alarming number at all, or just a sign of the times, or?
I would look at it this way. It's certainly interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up. I personally think it's more indicative of some of the things that Tracy talked about too, where we have been focusing on becoming more efficient, more productive, taking advantage of technology, and as a result of some of those things, you see that play out, and I think that's supportive of some of those things. Now, does that answer all of it? Maybe not, but I think that's a large piece of it, and I guess that's where I'd leave that.
Okay, and kind of the same question, like with the employment statistics and applications as they continue to decline. I mean, is it worrisome, or is it a trend that you see continuing?
You know, and I just had this discussion with the employment manager, Jane Hannah, about that for 2017, and we really are kind of trending much like we are in 2016. It's concerning but not alarming. And of course, I think one of the things that we like to focus on is we make sure, and with the mayor and council support, you know, the compensation and benefits study that's coming up, making sure that we're doing all the right things as it relates to the pay and benefits for the City of Sioux Falls so that we can attract and retain employees. Obviously, there's much more to it than just that, but that is a piece of it, and we think we're doing that. But again, not alarming, and I think it's something everybody's experiencing right now. And frankly, as I said on the turnover side of the equation, I think we're enjoying a tremendously low turnover rate. In most places, at least in the trade magazines that I read, you'll see 10% is usually where most people are at, or higher. So we're doing very well on that side of the equation.
Finding good people and keeping them, right?
Exactly.
Right, thanks.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Starr.
Thank you. Thank you, Director O'Toole. It's informative to kind of see what we're doing with benefits and how we're treating our employees, and they stay with us for the long term. Back in May, I requested some information from your office concerning race, ethnicity, as well as female representation in our city government, and I shared it with the rest of the council at that time. Maybe I'll use the same term, that it was, when I looked at the numbers, it was concerning but not necessarily alarming as much when we look at the overall population of ethnicity and race in the City of Sioux Falls. But what are we doing to improve? Because I do definitely see there's some opportunities to improve, both in our public safety employees as well as our general employees. So I guess I'm looking for a little, what are we doing to get better where we're at, without digging into specific numbers?
Sure.
I'm sure that would bore us all.
Well, no, I think that's a good tee up for part of the discussion, because it is important to understand, you know, where are you first and foremost. And when I did provide that information, we obviously, first thing is tracking it, knowing where you are, okay? And of course we do that. With respect to, when you look at the available market for minorities, for example, and this was the data as of May 2017, the available minority market was listed at 6.6%. The City of Sioux Falls rate is 4.7%. Okay, the population is higher than that, but you're measuring against the, because there's always a certain segment that's probably a little bit challenging with respect to employment. On the female side of the equation, the available market for females was 48.4%, and the city was at 25.2%. So you kind of know where you are, and you do develop goals, and you do try to do more. And frankly, we're willing to listen to anybody if they've got any good ideas to share. I know that public safety does very well, and they each have active committees that are engaged to promote ideas as it relates to recruitment. Obviously, we have a designated human resources specialist from our office that is dedicated 100% to police and fire, and they're working in concert with those committees. And can I sit here and tell you each and every goal that each of them have come up with? No, I can't. I can't do that. I know that is something that yes, we're absolutely striving to improve those numbers. We want to be reflective. I mean, we're local government. It is our goal to be reflective of our community. We want that. At the end of the day, we're going to hire the best qualified candidate, and we're trying to balance that and say we want to have a diverse workforce as well. And we do think we're doing a lot of good things, but we're always welcome to any input from any organizations, any groups. We do a very good job of reaching out and making sure that those diverse groups are aware of the opportunities that we have. I can't make them apply, but they are going to have to compete in the process. But Councilor, if you have anything you'd like to ever share, or you ever want to have a discussion, we'd be very welcoming to that concept.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think the thing that concerns me the most is when we watch the national news and we look at different situations that are happening, it's because the city's workforce, whether it's public safety or things, don't match even close to what the community is. And when we hear numbers like our city is basically 80% Caucasian in rough numbers, but our school enrollment is about 60%. Our community is changing rather quickly, and I'd sure rather be out in front of this, whether it's internship programs, whether it's opportunities for students to become involved, to pass the test, because I know when I talk to some of our public service directors, agency directors, their concern is that people have trouble passing tests, entrance requirements, and finding those qualified applicants is difficult. But I think we have some responsibility to help people become qualified, whether it's training sessions that prepare you for the test. I don't know how you would prepare for a fire department career, but maybe that's something that we need to take a closer look at, that whether it's both our Caucasian and minority communities. So again, I really feel it's important from a policy standpoint that we're talking about training, we're talking about recruiting minorities, and to make sure that our city employees at least get a lot closer to matching our community.
And thank you, Councilor. And again, I think we absolutely share that as well. And I think, you know, and we just looked at some of this not that long ago in terms of some of the marketing materials as well, that whenever you do that recruiting, that you then start, you look like more like your community, so that those groups can see those that are active in your organization as well. And we're very sensitive to that when we do our marketing, and to include materials that illustrate that as well.
That's one more thing, and I don't want to dive deep into the numbers, but when you have a department that has 74 full-time employees and there's not a person of color as part of that department, that stands out to me. And so I want to make sure that it's at least brought forward today, and some of those things. And when you have 4 out of 200 and some employees, we're a long ways from matching. Some departments do a better job than others. So that's, like I said, as far as I want to go with that right now. So.
Any other questions? Councilor Staley.
Thank you. Say, I've got a question, Bill. First of all, what was the name of the study you said you're going to be doing that you?
We just generally refer to it as a compensation and benefits study.
Okay, what does that run generally? Do you pay for that?
That's going to vary. I would tell you that we earmarked about, I think it was about $100,000. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to spend all of it, because my memory from the last time we engaged in this, we had proposals that ranged from $20,000 to $100,000.
And when were you going to do this again? What?
We'll be doing an RFP for those services this year, but it'll be a 2018 expense, obviously, if the council were to approve the overall 2018 budget, because that's...
Would that ever, I mean, as far as we're talking about priorities, is that something that is really, that you could put off for a year? I mean, we're not...
No, it's, as I said, about every 8 to 10 years, we want to
Right.
do this study to make sure we know where... We do a lot of interim studies in between, smaller looks, but we always commit to doing a comprehensive study every 8 to 10 years, where you hire somebody to come in. That's a big part of what they do, to ensure you're you're with the market and you're competitive, so you don't slip on some of those numbers that I was just talking about in terms of your ability to attract and retain employees when they come in the door. So it is a significant study. There's a lot of work that goes into it. I've been through 3 of them, and it's a lot of work.
So you do them every 10 years? So you've been,
Every
3
8
of
to 10
them,
years.
that'd be 30 years worth?
Pardon me?
You've been through 3 of these, and you do
I've
them
been through
every-
3 of these in my career, yes.
Okay, that's, okay, I get that. Then the next question is, I noticed that highways and streets, we have 9% of the personnel, and culture and recreation is 11%. Tell me, what kinds of employees are involved with culture and recreation? I mean, I think it's interesting that we've got more people employed in that than we do in our highway department.
The culture and recreation, that would be your parks and recreation and library departments.
So library, and about how many people are we talking about? Roughly?
Yeah,
100,
I might have to
200,
follow up.
500?
Right off the top of my head, I don't have a number for you, Counselor.
And you don't know the street department either, how many? Maybe somebody could, I'd be interested to have that information.
Would you
And-
like it breakdown just via this chart that I'm showing right here, the
Yes.
corresponding actual numbers?
Yeah, I'd love to have
we'll
the
provide that for you.
numbers, and actually the
Absolutely.
description of what each person in that department does, I think would be really valuable. If we,
You would like to see
just
it?
like, I mean, like, are we talking in Parks Department, how many of those people would be part-time, summer employees? Or are we talking?
Yeah, we can get you the breakdown.
I'm on page 33. Yes.
Director O'Toole, is it not true that the majority of our major construction projects are contracted out? So we're using private companies and with their own employees to do a lot of our street
I have
work.
general knowledge of that, Counselor. I think that's accurate. Obviously, Mark Cotter would be in a much better position to speak specifically about that, but yes. But I think if I'm getting to your issue, you would just like to see the breakdown of the number of city employees for each of those. I can do it by department, or I can do it by those areas. It's not difficult to do, Counselor. We'd be happy to get it to you however you'd like it.
11% would be about 130. Is that what you said? I didn't hear it.
No, I asked him, and he didn't know. Okay.
So you could figure it out that way.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so if you'd get back to me on that, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, see no further questions. Thank you very much, Director O'Toole. And now we are up with Central Services overview by Director of Central Services, Sue Kwanbeck-Etten. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this afternoon about the divisions within Central Services. We have our Information Technology Division, where we develop, implement, and maintain computer systems in support of the city's information technology program. That includes all computers, mobile devices, software, hardware, and telecom for over 1,200 city employees. We manage and maintain our data centers, wireless and fiber networks, and support over 200 different software applications. We manage and maintain over 1,000 PCs, 250 laptops, over 130 tablets, and 480 mobile phones. GIS, Geographic Information Systems, we develop, maintain, and promote a shared geospatial resource. Multimedia Support has several subdivisions. CityLink, our 24-hour cable TV channel. We have the web office, where we maintain the city's official website. We have our copy center, document publishing specialists, which includes our graphic designers, and mail services for the city. Facilities management. We are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of city-owned buildings and properties. We maintain over 800,000 square feet in 39 buildings. Some of those, just to remind you, Carnegie Town Hall, City Hall Annex, the Law Enforcement Center, Environmental, Household Hazardous Waste, Street Fleet Campus, Landfill, Utility Billing, Parks Administration, Parks Maintenance Shop, 5 libraries, 11 fire stations, and many different public works buildings. We take care of the custodial work, repair and maintenance, and capital improvement projects on those facilities. And fleet. Fleet management, we are responsible for overseeing the procurement and maintenance of city-owned vehicles and equipment. We take care of over 1,200 components, so these are things like tractors, trailers, mowers, and over 930 city vehicles, the majority of which are utilized by police, fire rescue, parks and rec, and public works. Let's talk about what central services means to the city. We let the departments focus on providing high-quality frontline services. They should be able to concentrate on doing what they do best. We ensure that technology, equipment, and facilities stay up to date. Centralizing services allows for easier sharing of resources across departments. We provide consistent standards for building maintenance, custodial services, technology solutions, and vehicle utilization and replacement. We have consolidated maintenance and service contracts to establish the lowest rates possible. So these are things, everything from electrical, plumbing, HVAC, generators, elevator maintenance, fire sprinkler testing and maintenance, interior finishes, custodial supplies, and many others. I just wanted to take a minute to run through some of the technology projects that we've completed over the last couple of years. Our financial management system. By putting in the new system, this has allowed us to eliminate redundant data entry, provide real-time data, and finally to move to a paperless payroll system. Land management includes mobile and online capabilities and a central system of record for land management data. The park's online system, the upgrade included online shelter reservations and pool passes. The more that we can get online in terms of services, the more efficient we become. Last year, we did our responsive website. We find that almost 60% of users access the website via a smartphone or a tablet. So this project included a redesign of our existing site and implementation of new back-end architecture and front-end content for a mobile-friendly solution. Our website is very well utilized. Last year, we handled over 768,000 unique visitors, and we had over 5.1 million page views. Fleet software, we just implemented AssetWorks and launched it in December of last year. It includes a work ticket system, parts inventory, and integrated workflows that create efficiencies for the fleet mechanics, as well as administrative functions. And the data that we're gathering now within the software will allow us to strategically evaluate and plan for equipment needs, as well as facilitate the acquisition, repair, and replacement of vehicles, equipment, and parts to support our centralized fleet operations. Some of the bigger technology projects currently in the works include our public safety computer-aided dispatch. This is a joint city-county project with Zerker Technologies being selected through an RFP process last summer. They are a national CAD software company based right here in Sioux Falls. We're working with police, fire, metro, the jail, and the sheriff's office to configure the new system to handle 911 call dispatching and records management for our public safety agencies. The go live for this one is slated for the spring of 2018. Fire records management. Zoll software was selected through a formal RFP process last summer. So this solution will house fire incident response records as well as patient care data. This solution has an interface with the 911 dispatch software to receive call data. This is a very data-centric solution that will effectively generate reporting data for fire's accreditation process. And this software just went live last month. Utility billing upgrade. This software will provide an interface update for city staff, as well as our external customers, with additional features to access their account information online and pay their bills. Completion is slated for fourth quarter this year. Facility access and security. So with the construction of the Denny Sanford Premier Center and the Midco Aquatic Center, a new enterprise security solution was implemented. So this project will bring additional buildings into the new software system, and this will increase our capabilities to manage access across many locations. And we're planning to complete this by December of this year. Just to mention a few, again, of the bigger technology projects in the future, in the near future. Asset management. So, multiple departments are collaborating on this project to select a software solution to help us track and maintain city assets and resources. We completed a strategic plan in October of 2016, and then we did a needs assessment and requirements gathering earlier this year. And an RFP was just published to find the best software solution. By tracking condition and performance records in a centralized enterprise software system, we will have the data we need to reduce costs and mitigate risk through proactive preventive maintenance. Document routing. So, as an example, the process to route agreements and contracts is currently paper-based, which of course is slow and inefficient. We plan to implement an electronic solution that will allow staff to review and sign documents electronically. Public safety video system. So the digital video solution that has been a very important tool for the public safety team. Several years ago, we moved from an analog tape system to a digital system with videos being offloaded wirelessly and automatically, which of course reduced staff time managing the video handling. A replacement solution will encompass in-car cameras and interview room cameras, and will also need to be able to handle body cameras in the future. And an RFP is planned for later this year. Scheduling software. This solution will help the library staff manage the facility resources that are available to the public. So this will offer online reservations for citizens to access and check on availability for conference rooms and study rooms at the public libraries. The new admin building. You've seen this rendering before. As you know, it's currently being built. Steel is just starting to be erected now these last couple of weeks. We believe we have a timeless design focused on customer service, modern office and conference room space, built for growth to serve the public and our employees for decades. And as you know, constructed on city-owned land. So we're going to be able to discontinue our leased space by June of 2018 and move those departments back to City Hall. So by no longer paying for lease costs, the net impact to the 2018 budget will be $50,000. And then the last topic that I wanted to talk to you about today is our CIP plan for facilities. Last year, we completed a comprehensive building assessment, which has enabled us to create a multi-year plan to proactively address maintenance in our buildings. The plan is focused on the remaining service life of the major building systems. And the assessment data forms the foundation for our 5-year centralized facility CIP plan. And we know that priorities may change over the next 5 years, and that's okay. building maintenance and custodial care had been decentralized, with departments such as library, fire rescue, police, parks, public works being responsible for overseeing building repair and maintenance. Over the last 6 years, we have centralized those responsibilities to central services. As I said, we have 39 facilities with over 800,000 square feet that need to be maintained. By coming up with a plan for end-of-life replacement, we can hopefully reduce downtime due to equipment failure, along with increasing efficiencies and thereby lowering utility bills. Our plan focuses on updates and replacements for HVAC systems, electrical, plumbing, fire alarms, and building protection, network connectivity, and concrete and asphalt repair. The plan focuses on what we need to provide a safe, secure, and efficient building. We don't want to fall behind. We need to keep attacking the necessary upgrades and repairs to keep everything in good working order. And with that, any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I have a handful of questions, and I know that with it being centralized services, it falls under you, but if other departments need to answer, that's fine too. So I'll rattle off a couple and then yield my time and come back if they are not answered. So my first question would be in regards to payroll. I know you talked about payroll all being electronic, which is what everybody's doing, and it's a good thing. My question is have we ever considered going to payments twice a month versus every 2 weeks and getting rid of that extra payroll and looking at what that would potentially save, or would it not save anything? Really, there's, in the industry, it's, without, let me rephrase, throughout other businesses, oftentimes you get paid the 1st and the 15th, or the 1st and the whatever it is, based on that timeline. So I don't know if it would save a lot or not, and obviously the hours would be adjusted where your paychecks would be up and down a little bit. But I just would be curious if that's ever been considered.
That's not something that I have been involved in discussions with, but it's an interesting question. I guess I would defer to HR.
And I should have asked when you were up here earlier, but she mentioned it within the talking about it, and I was like, hey, that's...
And I was just visiting with Angie Youth, our compensation and benefits manager, as well. It's not something we've looked at. We've never had that jump out at us as an opportunity for any kind of savings. But we could certainly do some work in that arena if you thought there was some opportunity. If we certainly thought there was savings, we'd look at it.
Yeah, I just would be curious if if there's an expert within, or while you're doing your new research of looking at what the wages and benefits are, maybe that's something that comes out of that study. I don't know, but...
it normally would not, but...
Okay, well, but at a time when we're looking at really pinching our pennies at any moment, if we can save, $12,000, that's $12,000 to, fix a sidewalk or fix whatever it is that may need to be done. So just want to ask about that. My other question is back to Sue, thank you. My other question would be, as we talked about with planning and zoning, they had their EnviroGov, I believe it was called. One of the things that I'd heard from several contractors, and I ask this every year, and I'm just waiting for the moment for someone to say, yes, that went live, we can do it now. So I'll ask it again, and I can ask Mike Cooper. But if the permit is, if you're able to go on and check on that online versus calling it in, and, it was supposed to all go electronic, and that was kind of the last piece of the puzzle. Has that been done yet, do you know?
Parts of it have been done. So the CSS Citizen Self-Service Portal is up and available. What you can do right now is you can pay invoices online. So if it's something that's in the works and you want to pay it, you can pay it online. You can also go and ask to schedule an inspection, and you can do that online as well. And then the piece that you're talking about is this close. So
3 years later.
it was ready to go earlier this year, but legal said pump the brakes because there is a couple of fields of information that legal felt should not be out and available for all of the public to see.
Okay.
So what is happening now is we have pushed our vendor, and it's Energov, with Tyler Technologies, we have pushed our vendor to allow us, the City of Sioux Falls, to configure this to meet the needs of the legal team. And that is going on right now. And in fact, we just received a test in our test environment that is being tested right now. I should say also in terms of the legal opinion on that there has been a little bit of revision there as well in terms of what should be displayed, what shouldn't be displayed, but it should be yet this year, Counselor, that part will go live too.
Okay, then one more, and then I'll yield the remainder of my questions. The fire records management, is this just for fire, or is it for our EMS system as a whole? Like, is it, I mean, because we talk about our EMS system really as a whole, from fire, police, ambulance, all of that. So is this just for fire, or will this be expanded, or what will this look like?
I would defer to fire rescue for more specific questions. My understanding is that this is fire records management, where previously they did not have the capability to store all of this information in one central repository, again, for accreditation purposes. Pieces of it, I believe, had to be done more manually, and this is getting them those efficiencies where they didn't have them before. But I would defer to fire rescue in terms of more specific questions.
Perfect, I'll ask them. Thank you.
Councillor Neitzer.
Yeah, so I have 3 questions. The first is a public safety video system replacement. My understanding was, if I remember right, they have to replace all of the dash cams. That has to be done. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And then wasn't it, and as far as the body cameras, is that still kind of an optional thing if the budgets work and they decide, or has it been decided?
And I would defer to Chief Burns for more specific in terms of the policy piece of it. But I can tell you from the technology perspective that the entire system for the vehicle cameras and the interview rooms is slated for replacement next year. And so with that, an RFP will be developed later this year in anticipation of that. And then the requirements would include the possibility of body cameras, because obviously we want it all to be part of the same solution.
Sure, okay.
So I believe, I mean, they have been doing some testing with a couple of different products, demoing, if you will, to find, you know, the shortcomings and to better refine actually the requirements for the RFP.
Okay, sure. So that'll be, so the RFP would include the option so that
Yes.
if we decided it was something we wanted to invest in, it would work with the total solution.
Exactly right.
Okay. Number 2, the administration building operating budget. The net impact 8 months, 50,000. So that would be, and that's net. So, and you were making reference to the lease, and I think it's
Yep.
10,600 a month.
Yep.
Right now. So 125, 127, we would pay a year in lease. And then, so if the net is 75, so we're talking, so the total operating of the administration building would be projected to be, what would that be? 175, 200?
Not quite that high, but I mean, the utilities, of course, are the biggest piece.
Sure.
Utilities for the building, it's a large building. And of course, the offset for a smaller building like the one we're leasing right now, they're not going to be equal, you know. So that's the major expense in terms of ongoing operating. But the good news is that we will have geothermal. So
Yeah.
over time, we should be saving about 30 to 35% of our energy costs because we'll have geothermal.
And so for the operation piece, is that essentially, so the other piece was you just paid the lease, but on this one, this number, does that just include essentially the heating, the cooling,
It does.
not, okay.
But I am backing out what we were paying for utilities at the other building too, that we have been leasing. So you pay lease expense and then you pay utilities on
Oh,
top of
the
that.
utilities was on top of it. You were
Yes.
responsible for that too?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
that was part of the contract.
Okay, and then the last piece was, The managed facilities. So it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody who manages one of the managed facilities, and I think we were talking about this particular item, about the building assessment. And they were making reference to how it's more centralized now, where you did the assessment and you guys are kind of helping to make the determination of what should be prioritized first. And
Right.
so what part, though, is, just to be really clear, let's take one of the managed facilities. What does your department pay for versus, let's say, the entertainment tax pay for when it comes to, am I conflating two things? Or?
And let me just clarify, in terms of the assessment that we conducted was for city-owned buildings. We didn't include like the event center, for example, the convention center, those larger facilities. And I do believe a separate study actually was just done on that complex. I'm talking about, you know, all the other buildings that we maintain within facilities.
Sure.
But to answer your question in terms of like Pavilion and Orpheum and other managed facilities like that, we are at the table, as is finance, in terms of talking about the needs each year and their capital improvement expenses or what they believe they need to do. My facilities folks are involved in walkthroughs and talking through those priorities. That's kind of separate from what I was talking about in terms of our 5-year plan. So in terms of entertainment tax and that piece of it, I guess I would defer to finance a little bit more, but my understanding is the entertainment tax is utilized for event center complex and things like that.
Well, okay, so maybe as another example, let's just take the parks building or something like that.
Yep.
So what part, do you have any part in paying for any of the capital or equipment
Yes.
in there versus the parks being in their budget? Where's the split, I guess is what I'm sort of getting at.
So that's what's in the $550,000 per year for the next 5 years is a place to start in terms of all the needs that we have. So for HVAC systems, the things I mentioned, network connectivity and things like that, concrete repair, that will be. It previously has been in other departments' budgets. Now, in fact, streets, parks, police, fire all have line items in their budgets for R&M, essentially, but they are overseen by central services and facilities staff. So even though those line items exist, and finance likes to be able to look at libraries as a whole, for example, to know what does it cost to operate the library system for the city. So that's why you would see an R&M in the library budget, although they don't oversee it. We do in central services, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Councilor Staley.
Back to slide number 50. I was just wondering about the net, and I think Councilor Neitzer was asking this, but the net impact, projected net impact of that building for operational costs in 2019, did you say, is that what you're talking about, less than 200,000?
Yes.
But, so what, 190,000?
Because 50 over 8 months, that's 25, 50, 75.
Well, like I said, for the 2018 budget, the impact, net impact would be around 50,000. Net impact for the following year would be around 72,000 for 2019. Again, because of the offset for least expense that we no longer will be responsible for.
And then what is the net impact of the current city hall? Do you know what that costs to, or I mean, what does that cost to operate City Hall?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I mean, the primary expense is utilities, and I can look that up for you.
And so, just so that I'm clear, when we're talking here about what it's costing to run the building, right?
Correct.
When we talk about, so City Hall has, if you'd let me know that.
I will.
Do you think it's less than this?
I'll have to look it up, and I will let you know. I do think that in our new building, we'll have efficiencies from having a geothermal system. And like I said, utilities is the largest expense for any given building.
Right. And so does operation never includes the people needing to take care of the building?
Yes, it does. It definitely does.
Well, so that's included in the 72,000
Yes,
to pay the salaries?
in
and
terms of
staff?
net impact, yes. Yep.
Any other questions? Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up, because I wanted to go where Councilor Staley and Knights were just a little bit. So there are no bond payments. The debt service doesn't begin until 2019 when we'll see the bond payments that go with the new administration building as well. So I guess I'm interested in when that first bond repayment starts and it'll hit the budget. Will that be in 19, or what kind of impact that'll have on the budget?
Yeah, the bond payments would have started already this year.
In 17?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. So the bonds were issued, as I recall, October of 16, I believe. So yeah, we'd be making our first payments in 17.
Okay, so that is in the 16 or 17 and 18 budget already as
Correct.
part of the debt service in a different place.
That's correct, yep.
All right, thank you. I just have a couple easier ones, I promise. I'm curious about what Work City's initiative. And I don't know if I need to wait for Director Ketchum to get a little update on that and how that fits, or if that goes with the technology that as part of your department as well. So give me the 30,000 vision, because I've been trying to read the news releases and the information that we've gotten and trying to figure out how that's different than what we've been trying to do already and what kind of financial impact it makes, as well as the time impact that it takes away from or with city employees that are on staff.
And I would defer to Darren Ketchum, as he is the sponsor of the What Works City initiative. Certainly technology will play a role in this. We do have an open data portal already associated with SiouxFalls.org that we went live with in March of this year. Much of the data may already reside there in terms of the neighborhood revitalization initiative, which is the first component of What Works City. The project team is doing a data inventory right now to determine what's already there and what needs to be added.
Thank you. I told you it'd be easy. I wasn't exaggerating. That should be good for me.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Councilor Rolfing.
I have only one, Director, and that is in the public safety CAD call, what did you call it?
Computer-aided dispatch?
Yeah, computer-aided dispatches. Are we in consultation with Lincoln County on that at all?
Lincoln County was invited to be part of the project group. I will tell you this, they are already on Zerker. So they chose the software that we are moving to. So they're already there.
I knew the answer. I just wanted to make it public.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. One more easy question. I just would be curious to know if you, via email, it's fine, I'm not asking for it right now, but to have website statistics before and after, what the previous statistics were for that website before the new one launched, and what those page views and unique visitors look like, just to compare and contrast. I'm sure you have the information, so just for informational, I'd love to see that. You can send it to all of us, and you can choose to read it or not.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if there aren't any further questions, thank you very much, Director.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at the halfway point of our presentations now, but we're a little bit beyond the halfway point in time, so just want to alert everybody to that, and maybe that's directed more toward Director Ketchum and his staff. We're down to about an hour and 15 minutes, but our next item is Community Development Affordable Housing by Director Ketchum and Les Kinstead. So, very good.
Good afternoon, everybody. Darren Ketchum, Director of Community Development for the City of Sioux Falls. We're going to have each of our major organizational units come up and give you the details of their budgets. Les Kinstead with Affordable Housing, Brent O'Neill with the Economic Development, and Matt Nelson with Public Parking. I think we've got about 2 slides of information per each one, so we'll be expedient. Councilor Starr, maybe just to start with What Works Cities. I think certainly our efforts are seeking to take advantage of some of the work that's already underway in terms of the open government portal. We don't want to recreate the wheel with any of this. So we're fortunate that we had already started moving down that path. We've got about a dozen or a little more than that stakeholders from all the departments involved. Mr. Greco from the city clerk's office is also involved in this effort, trying to look at a problem holistically, and some of it may not necessarily be what is publicly available, but what we can access internally. Because believe it or not, there's still silos within city government that make it not as easy as it could be to access information across departments. So we don't have a budget associated with this initiative. Certainly if there's some things that align, we could take advantage of some existing budget authority. What I really see this doing over the next 2 months is giving us a good snapshot in this really focused area. And it could give us some ideas of future resource requests that we could bring to the City Council for consideration. I don't know if that answers some of what you were hoping for the What Works Cities, but kind of with budget season upon us, it got a little difficult to get to an informational, but if any of the council, we'd be happy to schedule some time and sit down and talk about this initiative. I just want to be respectful of your time. And but with that said, certainly I'm going to stay available for questions. Les will get started. And if you have any questions about any of our organizational units budgets, whether it's today or in the next coming weeks as you consider our approval, please let us know. We'd be happy to address them at any time. Thanks. Les?
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Les. Good to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. So, as you folks know, for the benefit of the television folks that may be watching, my name is Les Kinstad. I'm the Affordable Housing Manager for the City of Sioux Falls. In light of Chairman Kiley's comments about time, we've had an opportunity to interact both on an individual and a council basis over the last year, conversations with you, and I think I have a feeling that you're not unfamiliar with the kind of programs that we do in affordable housing. So we'll try and keep this to the 50,000 foot level and not get down into the weeds very much. So with those comments, we'll move on to the actual slides. Our budget request for this coming year is $4.2 million. We'll go into some of the details in a few minutes, but there are basically three major areas where we have activities when you boil it down. First is in increasing the supply of affordable housing. In this next year, we'll be taking a little different approach than we have in previous years, but we will be supporting three large affordable housing projects that will be going in for tax credits now in September of this year. So we will be able to provide them with some support, probably in a little different way than we have before, but we think that will give a good solid basis for those projects to compete at the state level. We've been talking, last time I was here at the council, we talked about the neighborhood revitalization program, and we talked about the homes that we build out in the community, the single family homes. As we told you then, we're gearing that program up. We'll be doing 15 and completing 15 homes next year throughout the community in the core of the city. So that program is kind of a major step up. We're starting to really gear up in that area. Our next major area is in stabilization of the supply of safe and affordable housing. The vast bulk of the activity in that area is in what we call single family rehab, where people that are low and moderate income people that are having difficulties keeping up their properties, having the neighborhood look the way that we all would like to have it look, and be code compliant and safe and sanitary. So we do 55 homes this next year that we'll be doing rehabilitation for those folks, helping them to accomplish that with their houses. In addition, we are shooting for 25 rental properties that we would be involved in up to $25,000 loans to help landlords clean up and make their property, again, in the category of safe and affordable housing. We'll be buying 9 properties in the next year. That's kind of an offshoot from our neighborhood revitalization program, but it gives us the lots and the basis to go on and in coming into next year and then, or coming into the following year, 2019. In addition, We'll be providing education and assistance for families. We have our Bright Futures program, a major initiative that we've supported now for some 7 years. It takes folks that are homeless, families that are homeless or near homeless, helps them provide a roof over their head, and gets them stabilized, and then gets them trained in some of the things that some folks weren't taught by their parents. And we learn, and they learn how to be self-sufficient in that effort. So again, at 50,000 foot level, that's the programs that we do. If you go to slide number 55, we're pretty much, with one significant exception, we're about equivalent to what last year's budget was. The one area that's a significant exception is that we did have $1 million in the 2017 budget of general funds through the large affordable housing projects. This year we've decreased that by $900,000, and we're down due to tough economic times to less money, but we still feel we can, in a meaningful way, contribute to those projects that will be going to the State Housing Authority for tax credits. So that's a major shift. Other than that, minor increases or decreases, but everything stays pretty much the same into 2018 with that one exception. Last slide that we have for you is information about the sources of our funds. As you can see from the chart, 48% of our funds come from program income. That's something we're very pleased with. Loans paid off, payments made on loans. So about half of what we do is money that's coming back into the program from investments that were made earlier. So that's always a good thing to see. Federal programs, the President's budget has been altered from what he submitted. The CDBG and home programs, at least in the Senate version, have been funded at the levels they were last year. There's still some things to work out, but it's looking a lot more positive than it was before. General fund contribution, again, like I said, is down considerably this year. We're at $800,000, but those give you the sources of the funds. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Les, thank you very much. And based on our timelines from last year, it does look like we're doing fairly well with time. So it was not my intention to have you rush through. No. Because your service, especially with the affordable housing, is extremely beneficial to our community. It goes hand in hand with our efforts in workforce development as well, too. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Councilor Kiley. I appreciate you clarifying that as well. I don't appreciate having people feel like they need to rush. So thank you, Les, also for being here. I just had a couple questions about particularly about the large multi-housing projects that we're talking about. If we can put those into perspective, it is different than what we've been doing in the past. Can you kind of put those into perspective for what you think they might be? Are they, is there something out there now that we might compare them to in terms of size and numbers of units?
In terms of size and numbers of units, will be, if I understand your question correctly, with the 3 that we're intending to support at a lower level of dollars, will still be, I would say, approximating the number of tax credit applications and units that we've had in previous years. So I don't see that number decreasing markedly, even though we do have that decrease in funds. It'll be tax credit dollars, and those have not experienced the cutbacks that we've experienced here.
Right, but because they're larger projects, we're putting more units into one location than we have in the past. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm not sure if I'm totally sensing where you're going. If you want to give me a little bit more information.
A clue. Let's think about the stigma of the projects in other communities over the history of affordable housing in this country. Okay. We have been very careful over the years in Sioux Falls to spread out our affordable housing units in smaller projects in various neighborhoods. And so my very specific question is, are these large units putting lots and lots of folks in one demographic in one location?
I think the answer to that question is a no. I don't see that change happening in the experience that I've had. There's still a sensitivity to not having all 30 to 50% people in one particular complex. you take a look at any of the projects that are out there, you've got some 50%ers, you've got some 30s, you got that. So concentration from that, from a nature of the tenant basis, I don't think that's happening at this point. As far as geographic distribution, both in the single family and in the large multifamily, you do see a geographic dispersion of them. I know right now there will be 4 applications going into Pier, and that those 4 applications are geographically dispersed throughout the community. So answer to your question, I guess I would say I don't see that kind of concentration happening. It may be something we need to continue to watch for. It may happen again in future years, but I haven't experienced that.
Right. Well, and it is absolutely something we have to continue to watch, to be careful about.
Sure.
And I don't want to, obviously we don't know what they are going forward. You have kind of a hint possibly as to what they are, but those are things that are definitely on the minds of those folks who elected us to sit up here. And so it is one of the first questions that I have to answer for people is,
Sure.
how does this work? And
Sure.
why are we putting them all in one place? Or why does it seem like we're putting them all in one place? So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Staley.
We talked, and you're right, we have talked a lot about this last year, so thank you for that. You're always very helpful, Les. You mentioned to us when you were here a few weeks ago about the community development piece, and did you say like 55 homes? Am I remembering that right?
The 55 homes represents the number of homes that we'll do in the single-family rehab program.
Yes.
So it's existing homeowners, low and moderate income folks who will be helped with that program.
And that's going to be a repayment of a combination. It used to be that you could get it in a low-interest loan, or you could get it at a no-interest loan, or you could have it totally forgiven. I think there were those 3 pieces.
The vast bulk of what you see comes in terms of either a repayment loan, which is the smaller. There are fewer of those than there are of the kind that are just carried for the life of the property. And when the property sells, those dollars come back in again. It's the program income that I was talking about a few minutes ago.
Still do that one, that it gets forgiven, or you pay it back when you sell the property? That's
you pay
still
it back.
there?
That's the vast bulk of them are either repayment loans or else they're paid when they sell the property.
Is there a piece that is totally forgiven? A little.
To the best of my knowledge right now, no, I don't think that's anything that's in the scope of things here anymore. So.
Okay, and then the apartment thing, did you say 25 apartments? Or
What I said with regard to apartment complexes, I know we have dollars that we intend to support 3. I know there are 4 applications going into the state. I would say the average number of units in any one of those is probably in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 units.
Well, I thought you said earlier, landlords, you were going to give them money to fix up their property.
Talking about a different program.
Yes.
Yeah, what I'm talking about there is 25 potential loans that we can put out to rental property owners.
And that would be for how much a piece?
25,000 each.
25,000.
Yeah. It can be up to 25,000. The average probably around 10.
And then when you come in there, let me backtrack. I was talking with a landlord one time about having the city help them, and they said that once you sign on to something like that, that you're really opening the whole property up to be inspected. I mean, that it could be that they find things that will cost a lot more than what this program's going to allow for. Is that, you kind of go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure
My understanding of the code process is that when something is redone or rehabilitated, if there's anything that directly affects a particular feature of the property that isn't in code, people will need to do that. I think it would be an overstatement to suggest that having a $25,000 loan for a rental property is going to cost you huge amounts of money. I haven't seen that in the time that I've been here.
So do you send it like if someone applies for that, do they send someone from the city out to, does the landlord say these are things I want you to do, or does the city come in and look at it and say these are the things you need to do?
In the vast bulk of the cases, it'd be a case of a landlord coming in and saying, I want to put new windows on this property, or I want to replace a furnace with a high efficiency furnace. It'd be things that the landlord would come up with. The only time I think that you'd get into the city doing it would be in the normal code building inspection function for a given construction project.
So if someone's interested in participating, they would, are we sending like little things in the water bill about that? I know they had
Yeah, we
that
do
furnace,
send-
about the
we've
landlord
recently-
part of it
yeah,
too.
Yeah, we have recently put that out. Well, and I shouldn't say in the water billing, that was with the single family. With the rental rehab, we send all the registered property owners that have registered their rental properties with the city. So,
Excellent, that's really great,
Yep.
thank you.
yep, thank you.
Any other questions for Les? Okay, seeing
Thank
none.
you.
Thank you very much, Les. Okay, moving on to economic development, community development by Brent O'Neill, our economic development manager.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. Excited to talk about our year and our upcoming year. What we're proposing for 2018 is an $8.4 million budget, which is about a $65,000 increase over our 2017 levels. In our division, we focus on really all things economic development for the city. That includes development and redevelopment, business development, and those business and industrial expansion opportunities. Our goal is to work with 45 individual projects that receive either technical support from our office or participate in one of our incentive programs. And then we're also trying to expand our efforts working with existing businesses on their expansion opportunities. That's often referred to as, in the terminology, BRE, business retention and recruitment. So that's a joint effort between the city and the Development Foundation that we're trying to enhance through the rest of 2017 and then fully in 2018. Of those 45 projects I mentioned there, just some recent examples, some names you might recall, of the Amesbury Truth Project on the west side of Sioux Falls, the Elmwood Holiday Inn, Republic National Distribution's new building, an expansion at JDS Industries, and then the Interstate Controls building out near the Southeast Technical Institute. Downtown is also a major focus of ours. We will focus again there mostly on redevelopment opportunities, implementing tasks from our 2025 downtown plan, and then again working with individual businesses in the Downtown Sioux Falls organization to enhance the overall climate, quality of life, and business atmosphere in downtown. Final major component of our office is, again, I referenced working with the Development Foundation on those industrial type projects. Those are largely working with prospects and trying to chase down those new investments into the community for large industrial type projects. Referencing the BRE program again, I just want to say that our existing businesses are very important to us. There's often different statistics that get alluded to when it talks about your existing businesses, but oftentimes the amount of your economic growth, 90% of that will come from your existing businesses, whether it's through expansion or innovation. So continuing to work there, and workforce development is a big opportunity and challenge in Sioux Falls right now, so that is one component of working with those existing businesses. Moving on specifically to the budget numbers, in a relatively small office, we have a direct operating budget of $700,000. That's the first two lines there. That includes our personnel cost, and that includes about $200,000 in some of our direct expenditures. The rest of our expenditures are divvied out into our partner organizations and then other commitments that the city has already had. We do contracted services with 4 partner organizations that help facilitate development and objectives of the city when it comes to economic development. Those 4 are Forward Sioux Falls, the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, Downtown Sioux Falls, Inc., and the University of South Dakota Discovery District. On that note, we had a little over $1 million in funding in the 2017 budget. We're going to be about $100,000 less than that in the 2018 budget recommendation. The last portion, those last 2 bullets there, are commitments that the city has made in the past. The CVB bid is a largest recipient of department funds, and those are collected from a hotel tax that is really administered through our office and then goes to fund the activities of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. The other is previous TIF projects that are now developed and now paying taxes, and the commitments that the developer and the city have made to each other means that the city is transferring those TIF funds to pay down with those developers those costs that the developers have incurred. So that is In sum, the big part of our budget, I'm going to close by just saying we're looking at a real strong closeout to 2017, a really robust 2018. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions? Let's begin with questions. Councilor Staley.
Brett, let me just backtrack. You said the personnel was $700,000 budgeted for your department?
That was a personnel and some of our direct operating expenses. So that would be like if we hire out an appraisal or a certain study that's affecting a project.
How many employees are in your department?
We have 6 FTEs. That includes 3 coordinators, myself, and then an admin assistant who supports my division as well as other divisions in the department, and then a portion of Darren Ketchum's time's allocated there as well.
Okay, and then we had a meeting a while back with some of the people from development corporations, Forward Sioux Falls, and I was asking them, how much money they get from the city, and they said, I think $680,000 that we give to them. So is that kind of somehow into this figure here? It's
sure. I think I know what you're referencing. So when we look at the contracted services, Forward Sioux Falls and the Development Foundation are 2 of those 4. The Forward Sioux Falls would receive $400,000 under the 2018 budget.
Right.
And then the Development Foundation would receive about $275, so pretty close to your 680 number. Those are related organizations, but separate organizations with just a little bit different.
Well, yeah, they all seem to be somewhat, there's some kind of a connection thing going on there, but.
Yeah. It's Forward Sioux Falls is a partnership between the foundation and the chamber.
So so contracted, we had $1 million, now it's 900,000. So what's the other piece of that?
The Discovery District and the Downtown Sioux Falls organization.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Just looking at our capital book, my question is in regards to the facade, core facade revitalization program and how it's zeroed out to 18. What's the reasoning behind nothing in 18?
Sure. Well, the biggest reason is in the scheme of the larger city capital budget, trying to understand how this program fit into that. This is one that I know some of you, maybe all of you, have heard me defend pretty staunchly in the past, and I would continue to do that. This is one where over the course of 3 years or so, we had a slow year, so we're able to carry some money forward into the next year. So we're actually going to be kind of looking at how we can best maximize the existing dollars that we have left this year. And I'll say that we do have them targeted on projects right now. It's just a matter of bringing them forward through the final approval process. And then it is our goal to keep that program going beyond 2018. And so we do have money programmed in the following years.
So how many applications do you get in a year on average? I mean, I guess I
would say on average, maybe 4. I mean, we've had years of 9, we've had years of 0.
It just depends on what's available and what they qualify for and all of that. And I know this program has come with some controversy over the years. But for me personally, to be able to maintain the integrity of downtown is really important to making sure we keep it that historical vibe and feel and make sure it looks like that downtown area. My other question would be is, you know what, I'm not going to ask that question because I think it's probably better for the city attorney. What would happen if somebody comes forward in 18 and says, we'd really like this and there's nothing there, it's just too bad, we're just not going to do it in 18?
Yeah, I think right now we're trying to look at how we're closing out our existing funding levels, and then we are going to reevaluate how we want to look at the program going forward. So right now, Councilor Erickson, I think we're just going to do a little bit more work on how we want to go through a hiatus, if you will, and then reboot.
Because would any of this, sorry if I may ask one more question just to understand it, would any of, like a facade easement, would any of that be able to qualify within a TIF, tax abatement, or any of those areas where we maybe don't really need to do the facade revitalization, we can really just stick it in with a TIF if a TIF is going to be done and qualified on a particular project?
Sure. That's a good question. In the past, TIF in particular,
we have rolled that in as an eligible TIF expense. And, you know, aside from the source of funding coming from the TIF versus the capital program, all the other requirements and agreements were the exact same.
So there's still options to be able to maybe do some of these things.
Sure.
It would just have to be qualifying in maybe a larger scale project or something of that magnitude. Okay. I just noticed that it was zeroed out and kind of, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. O'Neill? Seeing none, we'll move on again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, public parking. Mr. Matt Nelson, welcome, Matt.
Good afternoon, Matt Nelson, Public Parking Facilities Manager. Once again, we're pretty short tonight too. We have 2 slides, and our budget this year is $2.1 million, so it's not very large compared to some other departments, but we do play a vital role in our downtown and development here. Just a reminder, we are an enterprise fund, meaning we are funded by user fees. General tax dollars do not go to our department to support it. You'll see one change in a number here from 14 surface lots. We used to have 15. The lot that went away was where the city admin building is, so we lost that lot to build that building. We currently have 1,100 on-street parking spots just downtown, 2,400 off-street spaces. About 2/3 of those are in parking facilities and 1/3 are in parking lots. And what you'll see in our budget this coming year is a large investment in maintenance and safety for longevity and the safety of our downtown. We showed some pictures up here, and you'll see one project, or both these projects are actually from this year. One was the streetscape in front of our First Avenue ramp. We did both sides of that, and it was kind of a fun project. We got to bring a sculpture out of storage that the city had already purchased. We put in a pet relief area to help accommodate some of the residents downtown. So that was good. It needed to be done. The landscape was in very poor condition down there, and it was due to be done. But below, you'll see a picture from the Block 11 ramp. That hole is probably about 2.5 by 5 to 6 feet long. So we are investing in those facilities and making the structural repairs that are needed also. We invested about $100,000 in that facility this year, and next year you'll see a bump in our R&M funds of about $150,000. We're going to be putting approximately $300,000 in that ramp just in coatings for preventative maintenance. So they are very expensive structures to maintain, and we do want to make sure we maintain them for the long run. One of our main missions for downtown is to provide adequate parking supply. And you'll look below that, you'll see our occupancy rate is currently at 99%. And in 2018, we know we'll be above 100% for our occupancy rate. So we're struggling to provide additional parking downtown for economic development or for new businesses that may be coming downtown. We have 2 locations where we're providing parking, and they're kind of more located on the south part of downtown. So the Pavilion Ramp has a handful of spots, and the parking lot at 113 East 13th Street behind the Shrine Club has several parking spots available. But between the 2 locations, we're looking at about 60 spots that I would have readily available, which is not very many if you're a large business coming downtown. Our budget for next year, our total revenue you'll see is $3.2 million. There is some growth there. That growth is from rate increases, increase in daily parking usage, and just growth in our system. Personnel, our overall personnel cost decreased slightly from this year to 2018. And like I talked about already, our R&M, repair and maintenance budget, goes up pretty significantly. We've added about $150,000 to the 17 budget to cover a major expense for next year. The capital cost, there's a very small project in there. The amount on that is $57,000. It's not allocated to a specific project at this point, but it's there if we need to make a repair or upgrade that's unanticipated, it's available for us, and so there is no allocated project at this point. The next line down, you'll see debt service. The new parking ramp is not shown in this budget. We are going to come forward in September with a package. As we had previously discussed, we want to keep this together with all approvals together. So it is not included in this budget, and the debt service in 2018's budget is not there. So you can see our cash flow for this year is approximately, or for next year is anticipated to be about $1.1 million. Any additional cash that we do get is kept in our reserve fund. Currently, we have about $5.1 million in our cash reserve. Like I said, there's no major changes to our budget for next year. It's pretty flat. And at this time, we'll take any questions you may have on our budget.
Councilor Starr.
Sure. Matt, would you mind, in the total revenue number, because you've done user fees and fines, I'm assuming a large percentage of that is user fees rather than fines? I mean, can you break that down a little bit for us? I'm always curious how many dollars you can get out of a parking meter in coins, and I bet I'd be surprised when I see them collecting those, but.
Right. So about 2/3 of our revenue is come from the ramps and lots from lease parking, and about 1/3 would come from meters, meter bags, stuff like that. We're leasing on-street parking.
Almost $1 million.
It is. I can give you the
roughly
of the goods and services. I can get you an exact number if you want it, but
nope, that's close enough. I mean, that gets me the 2/3, third, just to give me a general idea of what we're doing, where the money comes from. Thank you.
Councillor Neitzer.
To clarify, was that million that you referenced, is that all the revenue from the parking meters?
No,
or is that just fines?
Probably my fines is a big part of it.
I can give you a better number on that.
I guess I should be looking in the book.
So from the meters, I would about 770,000 is meter revenue. Some sort of, like, it could be tokens, it could be meter bags, or it could be coins just going into the meters.
Okay, so there's not over $1 million in fines.
No, not in fines. And if you broke out actual fines, you can see there is that fines and forfeitures line. So the overall, but this includes snow tickets, includes airport tickets, tickets outside of downtown. It's about $500,000.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Staley.
Okay, so Matt, did I hear you right? It's 5.1 million that you have in reserves?
That's correct.
And how much of that were you going to be using for the new parking ramp?
We'll bring that total package together in September, but I think we've said our goal is around 20%. But when we bring all of it together or bring it forward in September, we'll have that final number for you.
So you weren't planning on using the whole 5 million? You say 20% of the 5 million you were going to use?
The goal would be, like a down payment on a house. I think we've always talked about 20%. When we get that final package together, we'll bring it forward. We would like to keep some money in reserve, just like the city budget keeps a 25% reserve. We also do for emergency repairs, maintenance. If there was some type of economic downturn, we want to be able to absorb that.
Well, yes, and I'm concerned about economic downturn. That's why I'm hesitant to have the second penny connected to this as collateral. I understand it's not going to be used for payment. But have you ever explored the idea of using the parking ramp system, existing parking ramps for collateral? Since they are generating revenue and they're stable.
I would welcome any options. We have a bond counsel that we'll bring on board to give us our best options. I'm not an expert in bond counsel, what we can pledge as collateral, but I would have no concerns pledging our resources or assets that we already have in our system.
Right. Yeah, and I haven't heard anything about this ramp thing. So it's going to look exactly as it was looking before? Is that when you bring it forward?
We'll bring the package
Talking
forward.
about the investor that has already been predestined.
Right, nothing has changed from the last time we were here. We'll bring the same package forward as we spoke about last time we came to informational.
Councillor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Matt, this is one of those crazy questions. Would you go back to your first slide? Look at that bottom picture. Did you seriously say that's a hole in the Block 11 ramp?
That is one of many holes in the Block 11 ramp that is patched. So what happens is there's actually cables in there. They're referred to as tendons, and they are the structural stability of the building, and they break over time. And as they break, you lose the structural integrity of the building. So many of them we splice or pull together. There were actually 2 this year that we had to run entirely new cables through the concrete, which gets very expensive. So if you went up there, at one point you would see 20 holes, not all that large. But yes, that's not uncommon for us to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
Good presentation. Okay, before adjournment, the next budget hearing is scheduled for August 8th, next Tuesday. And we will be hearing again from Director of Finance Tracy Turback on the entertainment tax. We'll hear from Director of Public Health Jill Franken regarding public health. We'll hear from Director Don Carney of Parks and Recreation on the Parks and Rec Department. And then we will also hear from Director of Public Works Mark Cotter on Public Works. And just as an FYI, we're also considering adding just another item to our hearings, and that would be involving our own city council budget, as some questions have arisen here, and so we'll address those at that time. Since they are not noticed to be addressed here today, we'll schedule that for next Tuesday. Councilor Erpenbach.
Just one note of clarification for presenters. Councilor Rolfing brought this up a couple years ago, and it worked really well, that the future presenters, if you could add to your PowerPoint the page number where your budget starts, the page number in our budget books, it makes our lives a whole lot easier up here, so we're not guessing at what is it, how many fines, is it 500,000 or is it $1 million? If I can look at page 105 and I know that on the PDF there, then I'm in great shape. So future down the road, please put the page numbers on there or announce it when you come up. So thank you, just courtesy.
I wouldn't disagree, but I know Bixler handed us all these sheets, and it's easier when I'm not going through like 5 different
Right, I'm just at a point where I'm on paper overload, and so I'm just saying if they could be on the PowerPoint, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good suggestion. Thank you, Councilor Erpenbach. I'm sure you thought of that yourself. It wasn't Councilor Rolfing, but all. All right. That brings this meeting to a conclusion, and I do know that we have National Night Out activities that a lot of us would like to participate in as well, too, so enjoy your time with the neighborhoods, and we'll see you again at the 7 o'clock meeting. This meeting is adjourned.